Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please join our community by subscribing to us on the socials. Our handle on all platforms is at N2E Fantasy. We are also available on all major podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
In this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, we are recapping all wildcard weekend and previewing the Divisional Round games. But first, a little bit of league news here. Patriots hired, surprise, surprise, Mike Vrabel as their head coach. He's a former staffer there with Belichick, former player there with Belichick. He is what they're hoping they wanted out of Gerard Mayo. He's going to be a defensive mind. He's going to be a leader of men. Jeff, he's one of your favorite coaches of this current generation of coaches. What do you make of this move?
This is a good move, and this puts the Patriots with Vrabel and Drake May, that tandem, it puts them on a trajectory to be the number 2 team in the AFC East. So that does put them in playoff conversations, maybe not year one, because we all know that the Patriots are lacking weapons for Drake May, but they could address that as early as this year. Let's say they draft a receiver high and bring in like a guy like T. Higgins that completely revamps their receiving core in a flash. So there are ways to potentially improve the receiving core as early as this year. I do anticipate this means really good things for the Patriots defense getting back to its roots. If you remember correctly, the Titans, when Vrabel was there, were never really favored to win the division. They always felt like the second best team in that division, whether it was behind Luck in Indy or Jaguars when they were up for a little bit, and even the Texans had a little bit under Deshaun Watson. But there were times where they got the number 1 seed in the AFC because Vrabel knew how to overcome the regular season. And he made some championship games, some AFC championship games, at least one of them. And I do anticipate there being some prestige return to the Patriots organization here. Now, on the other side of that, they're going to have to consistently go against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, I'm not saying Sean McDermott, because if Sean McDermott loses earlier in this playoff, then his job could be in jeopardy that no one is talking about right now. So what do you think about that, Alex?
I have a lot of thoughts about Vrabel. I mean, he was a good player. He came from a very well-coached organization originally. He was the Texans defensive coordinator. I thought he did well as a defensive coordinator for the Texans. He did fairly well as the Titans head coach. My only negatives for him is he can be a little cruel from what I've heard. He's a little too blunt, a little too mean sometimes. Yes, he can be a good leader, but I also think that that could rub people the wrong way, especially ownership or people in the front office who can't handle it as well as players can. I do think that he's shown in the past the ability to identify good offensive play callers, because he did that. I believe he had LaFleur as his OC in Tennessee, and he's done well as Green Bay's coach. So there's a lot of positive signs. If they're trying to recreate the Patriot way, this is the absolute best Belichick disciple, the one that's been most successful anywhere, because I don't really care for Bill O'Brien. I don't care for Josh McDaniels. I don't care for Mangini or any of the other guys that branched off. Vrabel's the only one that has the possibility of working. So if that's the direction they're going, that's the best hire for them.
Absolutely, and you can expect their defense to really pick up in year one. I think that'll be the first area that he really improves, is putting a strong defense around Drake May.
Yeah, I expect they'll bring in a more power running back to complement Stevenson. I expect they'll bring in a better offensive line, another corner, and a wide receiver. Those would be the 4 biggest positions with Vrabel.
Yeah, and I expect Stevenson to show some positive movement forward this year. I think with a new coaching staff, he'll be out of the doghouse that he was in towards the end of the year. And then we have to remember, before the season started, Stevenson signed an extension that hasn't even went into effect yet. So he's going to be around there for the next 1 to 2 to 3 years. So there's some incentive and some hope for previous Stevenson owners.
Her offensive line play, better play calling will open things up for Stevenson, as well as second-year leap from Drake May.
Absolutely.
All
All
right, we
right.
can move on to the next item here. The Dallas Cowboys let Mike McCarthy's contract expire. He is now a free agent after denying Chicago a chance to interview him a week ago. Jerry has just let him walk. It's the stupidest thing. It's so disrespectful, and it makes people not want to
Petty.
go to Dallas. Yeah, it's very
petty.
petty. Cowboys are going to go in maybe 3 different weird directions. They might go for Deion Sanders, bring him out of college, which would be interesting and about star power getting people to talk about you. Or they could go a familiar face in Kellen Moore as well, which would kind of feel like a Jason Garrett hire all over again. Or they could go Colts Jeff Saturday kind of thing, bring in Jason Witten, who may or may not be a good coach. I don't know, because I don't think he's coached. So all of this would be, I don't know if any of it would be good. I think that they should go after a better candidate here, but they joined so late. All these guys are preparing for their playoff games. I don't know who they will end up getting. What do you think? Who do you think they'll end up getting, and where does Mike McCarthy go?
So I think the best scenario for Cowboys and Cowboys fans is Deion Sanders. And I think this for a couple of reasons. One, what he's done in Colorado. So that's one thing. Thing number 2 is I think Deion Sanders has the most chance to have Jerry Jones be out of his business. And also, I don't think Jerry Jones would treat all-time Cowboy great like Deion Sanders like he did Mike McCarthy on the way out. So I think that that's a benefit all around as well. So less meddling Jerry Jones, it would feel like. And yeah, I think Coach Prime and the NFL just, it feels right. It puts him onto the big stage. Obviously, that would draw additional eyes to the product. And I think that's the best bet. I think Kellen Moore is the worst bet because I think Dak Prescott had his worst year under Kellen Moore when we thought he would have potentially his best year under Kellen Moore. So I'm not sure Kellen Moore is head coaching material, especially after the work that he did with the Cowboys. Who was he with this year? What was it? It was the Eagles, right?
Yeah. So with the Chargers, he had a terrible run game, but a pass-happy offense. They got Keenan Allen a lot of points, a lot of receptions, and Eckler a lot of receptions. Now with the Eagles, he's done the complete opposite. His star wide receivers aren't really getting the ball that much, and Saquon is blowing it up. So is that just how the offense was, whether Kellen Moore's there or not? Is that just because Saquon is a really good running back? I don't know. So he's had different kinds of offenses, 3 different stops that he's been at. Maybe that's how versatile he is, or maybe he's only as good as what the roster is. I don't know, but it would feel very lackluster.
Yeah, I would be against it. He can't bring Saquon Barkley with him, and the amount of talent that the Philadelphia Eagles had this year was absurd on offense, and I'm not sure that was really coaching overall. So we have that question mark as well.
Well, I think out of the 3 coaches that they're reportedly interested in, I think Prime would probably be the best, but I don't know. I think that there's better coaches out there that Jerry's not even going to talk to or take seriously.
Well, and I think, as I mentioned, Prime is a ideal scenario only because I think that limits the amount that we see Jerry a bit, because I think he lets Coach Prime have the spotlight. Because I think that Jerry has respect for all-time Cowboy greats, and Mike McCarthy wasn't it.
But that applies to Jason Witten too.
Yeah, I don't picture Jason Witten as a Hall of Famer, and I believe Deion Sanders is a Hall of Famer, though.
I think Jason Witten's a Hall of Fame player.
Okay, that's a hot take, but okay, I'll take it.
I don't know if that's a hot take.
I don't have a strong opinion either way.
Jason Witten's probably my favorite Cowboys player ever.
Well, you live real close, and That was the only team in the area for a hot minute there.
I don't live real close. It's almost the other side of the state.
Hey, same state though. It'd be like if the Buffalo Bills left the area, then there would be a lot more Giants and Jets fan, even though it's on the whole other side of the state. And in a different state, technically, but
I want to say
representing New
you
York.
probably have maybe 4 teams that are closer to you that aren't even in your state than the Cowboys are. I don't know.
Interesting.
I'm just saying stuff.
You're just saying stuff. You admit it finally.
But I'm not optimistic for the Cowboys' chances this next year, no matter who their coach is. I just don't see anything. And meanwhile, the Jets have interviewed every single possible candidate out there with no decision on who they're hiring. Chicago is kind of doing the same thing, but Chicago seems like the number one favorite now to switch gears for Mike McCarthy rather than a Ben Johnson or a Liam Cohen or someone that's a little bit flashier of a name. Do you think McCarthy to Chicago is a better hire, or what do you think?
So I think he's a grown up. I think that's thing number one. I think he's offensive minded, which is thing number two. And as we were talking yesterday offline about Caleb Williams, I believe that he's going to be successful. I mean, I think he's set a baseline of 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, and I think like 6 picks or something like that. He's only going to grow from this if he gets an offensive minded coach, because you have to remember Caleb Williams had 2 head coaches and 2 offensive coordinators in his very first year of being an NFL quarterback. If he gets a grown up in the room that's offensive minded, gives him some stability, actually works with him, there is a chance that like this baseline is literally his floor and he just has a much higher ceiling. So I get excited for that with the McCarthy hire. I think the offensive pieces that the Cowboys have and going to the offensive pieces that the Bears already have are night and day. And I think Jerry Jones kind of did Mike McCarthy a favor by letting Mike McCarthy walk, because the cupboards aren't exactly stocked in Dallas right now. They don't really have a running back right now. Dowdle is a free agent, if you did believe in him. So he's a free agent going into this year. And then number 2, they really have no number 2 receiver behind CeeDee Lamb. I know you like Tolbert, but he has not proven that he can put up wide receiver 2 numbers just yet.
Well, looking at Chicago, I don't know if I buy Swift as a permanent running back 1 in that offense.
But do you buy Roshan?
I love Roshan. He hasn't quite showed it, so I don't know if I
Because
could
he
support
hasn't had the
him
right
until he has.
coach.
So maybe their offensive line needs to be adjusted a little bit. Keenan Allen's
Yeah.
gone unless they re-sign him. I think he only had a 1-year deal. So that means DJ and Odunze, which is a better combination than what the Cowboys have, as well as Cole Kmet. So that looks great on that regard. It's not perfect, but it is better just in a tougher division. The defense is almost set. They maybe need 1, maybe 2 pieces on defense to make it truly lethal, but their defense is actually pretty solid. So it's a better team than what their record was. I do think that many people get stuck on Caleb Williams' stats and say, look at all that potential, and he only had a few amount of interceptions, but watching him play, he should have had a lot more. And some of the reasons why he had low interceptions is he took an insane amount of sacks this year because he held on to the ball. So if McCarthy can get him to speed up his process, get him to get the ball out quicker, if he can get him easier reads off the bat, really utilize at least 3 of the weapons that they have and rely on that, it might get more efficient and you might throw more. You might have more numbers. You might get rid of some of the sacks and the game ending plays. The only thing that Mike doesn't do is I don't think he improves on the game management or decision making, because it seems like it would be the same from Eberflus to McCarthy. That's one of his weaknesses, is into the game, doing timeouts, managing the victory. It's both of their weaknesses. I don't think it's as bad as Eberflus, but it's still not perfect. So I think that would get Chicago to maybe like an 8-9 record or above, maybe, depending on how things shake out, which is already an improvement over this last year. But again, I like swinging for the highest upside you can get, so I'd rather have a Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen, but that has a lower fail rate too. Mike McCarthy is a nice, solid. He gets you here and here. Like, this is his range of success.
Yeah, and he's much closer to Sean Payton career-wise than people want to admit. And Sean Payton was traded for multiple picks to go to Denver. So also that, and yeah, there's no way anybody is as bad as Eberflus at the end of that one game that got him fired. So
Yep.
McCarthy is an immediate improvement on that, but also I don't think there's very many coaches that handle the clock very well. Like Bill Belichick was a master of it. Andy Reid's pretty good at it, but everyone else is very mediocre to mid at that. So I don't know if we get I don't know if teams should start hiring like a game management coordinator, like where they're just in the coach's ear chirping, like, hey, we need to call timeout.
It should. Some of these coaches, like your boy Mike McDaniels in Miami, needs to get a challenge specialist because I think he's like 3 for 19 or 4 for 19, something like that. Like, I don't know how these coaches don't have someone that's more accurate and say, hey, throw the challenge flag or don't throw the challenge flag.
Yeah,
And
in their
they need,
ear. Someone
yeah.
watching the tape.
And some of these guys need to have someone that knows basic statistics that's like, hey, don't go for it on 4th down on your own side. Like for Dan Gamble over in Detroit. It's like, hey, you go for it now or you don't. Or someone who says that they're aggressive and they end up punting on a 4th and 2. Like, there's a lot of coaches out there that you can pick apart that way.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned Liam Cohen. I put him kind of in the same category as Bobby Slowick. One good year, I need to see a second before I give you a head coaching job, before I put you as the CEO of my franchise.
What I like about Liam Cohen is not only did the passing offense continue off from where Canales put them, but they also got the run game going and got it looking as good as it's looked since maybe Gruden's been in Tampa. So I like the offense. I think Cohen's a better coordinator than Slowick at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. But just being a good coordinator doesn't make you a good head coach, because that
That's
puts
true.
you as the guy, the director of everything.
But that's why I think he has a higher upside, lower floor than
Yeah.
McCarthy. McCarthy's he's like above average, safe coach, not going to be a super far floor. His floor is probably 8 and 9 with Chicago if they hire him. Might be as many as 12 games, the high side. I don't know. It's like a safe, like he's going to be a safe amount of victories.
Yeah, and I admit that like guys like Ben Johnson, who have shown it multiple years, could be a great head coach, but he's also not going to be able to bring all the talent that he's already amassed in Detroit with him. So I just feel like expectations will be too high on a guy like Ben Johnson, and I think that might cause him to fail quicker, because if you don't regulate your expectations early and they're below expectations, then it could end very poorly quickly. Like if you look at Minnesota this year, Kevin O'Connell, I think at max we had them at 7 wins entering the season. They went 14 this year. So that's coaching. That's also Sam Darnold improving, but like they were above expectation. The Bengals were below expectation this year, and I think that could blow up a team much quicker being below expectation. So let's say a team like the Bears hire Ben Johnson and they think it's going to be playoffs year one, and it's not playoffs year one. That is going to be a disappointment, and that could potentially lead towards a spiraling mess. But if Ben Johnson goes to the Raiders, which is the rumor right now, his expectations are going to be very moderate in year one, and he can improve on that slowly. So there is some strategy to accepting the right job also.
Yeah. I just don't see the appeal to the Raiders to most
Well,
coaches.
Tom Brady's becoming the owner there. Like,
I don't understand why that's appealing because he's not going to be able to buy the team all the way. He's just a voice now. So now you're dealing with multiple voices. You probably think that Aiden O'Connell is not it. They're not in striking range to get a quarterback. Maybe there's one they're slightly interested in the offseason, but they're not going to be that great. Their best wide receiver is Jacoby Myers right now, and obviously you have Bowers at the tight end position. You don't really have a running back. Your offensive lines may be average. The defense, there's a couple guys you paid a lot of money for that didn't really contribute this year. You have to make a decision about your best player, Crosby, whether you're going to trade him. I don't know. I don't see that as that appealing. I feel like you have a
Yeah,
better chance of fixing the Jaguars than you do the Raiders right now.
that's true. That's true.
In Florida,
But
there's no
maybe he
state income tax.
trusts. I do think that Tom Brady is the voice in the room right now for the Raiders. I don't think Mark Davis has ever really had a great voice in that room, and I think he's ceded it to Brady. Brady also is going to be able to buy more and more of the Raiders with his Fox money every year. So you got to remember that he signed that big deal with Fox.
There's
So
a good chance they fire him and pay him the entire contract because he's not been good as an analyst. I don't know if that's his skill or because he can't talk about anything or do anything because he's a partial owner of the Raiders.
yeah, and that's the best thing ever. And he will take that any dollar that he gets now and invest it into the Raiders. I think he eventually ends up with 50% ownership of this team, like at some point down the stretch, and even potentially a majority owner. I mean, Brady is very successful in all forms of business. So he may not be a successful announcer, but he is successful at putting away a lot of dollars.
I don't know. Was he successful with TB12? Did that make any money?
Probably got Alex Guerrero at least onto the team, and then kicked off the team, and then
Didn't he
brought back
didn't he
onto
lose
the team.
a lot of money on crypto with Sam Frankenstein, whatever his name was?
Absolutely, but he bought, what was it, 3% of the Raiders so far?
I haven't seen a definitive number. It would be hard for me to imagine him being able to buy 50% of the Raiders because even his Fox deal, which is I think a maximum of 350 million,
Mhm.
wouldn't be enough to get close to half the Raiders.
So Tom Brady bought 5% of the Raiders for 220 million. So he would be able to get up to roughly 10 to 15% with his Fox deal. But also, we're forgetting that he takes away 5% of the revenue every year, whatever's left over from the paying from the Raiders. So he could just reinvest all that right away into more percentage. So this could tick up year over year.
Yeah, so he could buy the Raiders in 30 to 50 years.
I mean, I think he would be a good NFL owner, but that's just my opinion. I've seen the way that he's handled running a franchise, being the quarterback of it for 20 years, so I feel like he could run a whole franchise also and then leave a legacy for his family too. Also, his divorce went through before he bought an ownership into the Raiders, so now his ex-wife doesn't get any percentage of the Raiders.
Well, she has more money than him, so she would actually owe him money. He'll use
For
her money
now.
to buy the Raiders, yeah.
For now. I mean, eventually this is going to pay off for him because NFL franchises are only going to go up in value year over year.
All right. Well, now about 30 minutes into the show, let's see. The Colts will get to host the first ever international game in Berlin, Germany, and the Dolphins will host the first ever Madrid, Spain game this year. Jeff, are we excited for more international games, more early morning games?
I'm pumped because, as I've mentioned before, that's my sausage, biscuits, and gravy morning. And you're like, what do you know about sausage gravy from the north? But I know plenty about it. I make a killer one. I make biscuits from scratch. No Pillsbury Grands over
Is it
here.
white or brown gravy?
It's white.
Okay, that's the good kind.
Yep. I had to think about it but yeah, it's milk based, so yeah, it's white. But yeah, it's delicious. I'll be making it this weekend too before the playoff games. But yeah, I'm really pumped about both of these teams hosting. It makes sense for AFC teams to be hosting this year, as I mentioned, because they're going to have that ninth home game. And the NFL does strive for some semblance of fairness and equality with the schedule. So this is the way to do that. If they were going to keep it at 17 games a year, I would love to see 16 international games a year. So that extra game every year that either conference gets would be a international game or a different city. Because I believe like St. Louis that lost the Rams deserves a game. There's a few other stadiums throughout, like San Diego. I mean, I'm not sure if they kept their stadium up, but San Diego deserves a game. Like, let's not just keep them international. We could travel them to more neutral sites.
I think the Chargers should go back to San Diego. I don't think LA will work for both of them, both the
They never
Chargers
will
and
because it's monetarily working for both of them very well. And the facilities are top notch. And San Diego would never build them a stadium. So the problem was the facilities, not the city. And now they have the facility. So unless San Diego is willing to build them the facility, they're not coming back. But they could be open to business to like San Antonio or St. Louis or wherever.
But yeah, maybe I'll get to catch an international game in person sometime. That'd be kind of cool.
And Alex, it does seem like Los Angeles is working for both of them because they're both in the playoffs. They both played in the wild card round. And that
They
brings
both
us,
were in the playoffs.
well, that brings me to the wild card recap. And the number 5, Los Angeles Chargers, were defeated by the number 4 Houston Texans. Justin Herbert had a really rough day with 4 interceptions, and they lose to the Texans 32-12. Once the game got out of hand, I don't really count the last couple of interceptions against Justin Herbert, who was trying to force something to happen. The first few were very rough. The run game was not there for the Chargers as well, but Joe Mixon and Nico Collins have large days for the Texans. Also, on the other side of it, and this is something that's going to grow, Ladd McConkey had a huge day for the Chargers and went 9 for 197 and a touchdown. So even though the Chargers are home, like this, I think was their ceiling in year 1, making the first round of the playoffs. You didn't even have them making the playoffs, so I consider this a year 1 victory for Harbaugh and Herbert. And I think they build on the Ladd McConkey and Justin Herbert connection, and I think they probably add another receiver this offseason as well to pair in there and have Quentin Johnston be the number 3 receiver. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Alex? We both picked the Chargers and we both lost.
I'm happy to lose. I'm happy to be wrong. The first quarter, I thought that the Chargers were slowly going to win. And then everything. So, like the first drive the Chargers had, one of the Texans defenders wisely stayed down and got an injury TV timeout, slowed everything down. That slowed the momentum for the Chargers, and they had to settle for a field goal. Then the Texans defense stepped up, stopped the Chargers again for another field goal. It stayed close until close to the end of the second quarter when CJ Stroud just kind of snapped out of his funk and started playing very well. And the Texans went into the half up 10-6. And from there, their defense just dominated. Anytime the offense struggled a little bit, the defense would shut down the Chargers, get the ball back for the Texans, or, get the Chargers the punt. The Chargers just looked awful the whole second half. Herbert tried to connect with Quentin Johnston 5 times. Johnston dropped the ball every single time. Even one that looked like he almost caught it for on 4th down. He was a full yard short anyway and wouldn't have made it. It was very interesting. Just the Texans front 7 and plus their corners were all pretty much healthy. And they blitzed the bejesus out of the Chargers. Because you were thinking, going into the game, the Chargers had 2 really good offensive tackles. Well, the Texans exposed them and blitzed in the middle, made them come in a little bit, and then came around the sides, too, with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, as well as in the middle. Herbert had no time to throw, and when he did, he threw to double coverage, triple coverage, or to Stingley or Lassiter, which had amazing games on the defensive side. So I may be getting a Stingley and Lassiter jersey, and I'm both on the record for saying there's a specific corner I liked over both of them in both their draft years. But I really like what they've done. They've really proven to be both of them shutdown corners. I'm probably going to get jerseys for both of them going forward. And Texans are going to make it a close game, I think, next week. We'll talk about that after we wrap up this past weekend.
Absolutely. So we can move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the number 6 seed at the number 3 seed, the Baltimore Ravens. And Derrick Henry and Lamar run all over Pittsburgh and win 28-14. Russ and George Pickens connect for a few huge plays, but it was too little too late. And Alex, I have a question about Pittsburgh, but we both picked Baltimore. We both won this matchup, but I'll let you recap it. And then I also want to know where Pittsburgh goes from here.
So, although the score was relatively close, 28-14, I felt like it wasn't close at all. I mean, Baltimore was up 21-0 at the half, and didn't seem like the Steelers were able to get anything going on offense. They haven't figured out their offensive line, even though they have a lot of young, talented linemen. They weren't able to get anything going on the ground. The Ravens pretty much forced Russell Wilson to throw. He really only had George Pickens as the most successful option to throw to. I don't know why Freiermuth wasn't involved more. To my poor play calling, it seemed like Russell Wilson was frazzled a lot in this one. They had a couple bad endings to drives. It looked like the Steelers were on the way to coming back and maybe tying up the game. Russell Wilson held on to the ball, took a sack, was poor game management, ran out a lot of clock, had a bad throw, but then had a good throw that was dropped by Freiermuth. It was a up and down game the entire time, and I don't think Russell Wilson is enough to get the Steelers past the stiff competition in their own division, and I think Baltimore played a very good conservative game this week. Derrick Henry obviously getting 26 rushes, Lamar Jackson getting 15, Justice Hill getting 6, and Lamar only threw 16 passes this entire game, so not much statistics in the air. They just played a much better game and played good defense.
Absolutely. So where do you think Pittsburgh goes from here in 2025?
It's so tough because they're not in a position to draft a quarterback. There's not really that many options in the free agency. I mean, there's a decent amount of options, but none of them are going to put you where you need to be to get past Lamar or Burrow. So it's either re-sign Russ, who's 36, or to go after like a Darnold. I mean, I feel like those are the only real options they have.
Yeah, or they could go after an Aaron Rodgers, which we talked about offline. But there was some talk about Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers reteaming up somewhere.
Yeah, they're going to keep Tomlin, and Tomlin's not going to approve a trade request anywhere. So that just means a quarterback. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a possibility, but I think they're trying to find a long-term answer and not a short-term.
Well, they went with 35-year-old Russ in 2024, so that doesn't prove them looking for a long-term solution when they had 25-year-old Justin Fields.
Yeah, so they're trying to see which,
and they didn't start him.
They brought in two different options. And I don't think Russ was ever meant to be long term. I think Fields, they wanted to field him out to see if he could be.
Well, you have to remember he started off pretty hot this season. He was still benched for Russ.
Yeah, I mean,
but McCarthy would be the offensive coordinator, not the head coach there.
Well, I think he's going to get a head coaching job.
Me too.
I hope so. Not that I think he should per se, but I think he will.
Man, we completely disagree on him. Then Sean Payton should be fired.
I like Sean Payton more. I think Sean Payton is smarter, honestly.
They both have one Super Bowl win, so with Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
I think that Sean Payton will have one before McCarthy.
All right, we will see. Obviously, the NFC is a little bit easier. I know the division that you'd be going to with the Bears is not one of the easier, but you'll admit that the Lions and the Vikings could take a step back this year if the Lions lose both of their coordinators, if the Vikings with their salary cap situation and their current pick situation. So both teams could take a step back, and Chicago could take a step forward next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. Anything else on this matchup or Pittsburgh's future?
No, I think that's it.
I mean, I echo the sentiment from everybody that I don't think this team's ever going to be a Super Bowl contender with Tomlin at head coach, but he does win you 9 to 10 games a year. So, I mean, you take the good with the bad, you stay relevant, but you never get bad enough to get far enough down to be able to draft the next guy. Speaking of the next guy, I do believe that the Broncos have found their next guy in Bo Nix. They were the 7th seed traveling to Buffalo as the number 2 seed. Bo Nix looked amazing on his very first drive, which we admit that the team has everything scripted on the very first drive. So Bo Nix looked very good when everything was scripted, everything was great, and Denver is unable to score after that first drive, and the Buffalo Bills do end up crushing Denver 31-7. So that was very big and great. Just like in the Pittsburgh game where Lamar and Derrick Henry go off, in this matchup, Josh Allen and James Cook go off. So this does lead to the next matchup of the Baltimore Ravens traveling to Buffalo in a stellar matchup. And so we are at a 31-7 victory for the Buffalo Bills. Alex, other than Josh Allen and Cook and Bo Nix looking like a rookie without a run game, were there any other takeaways in this matchup that you noticed?
Oh man, no, I just thought that Buffalo outclassed Denver the entire time.
Yeah, and it's funny because Broncos fans wanted Buffalo, and there was "We Want Buffalo" chants in the crowd when they won in Week 18, and there was a lot of talking heads nationally that said that the most likely upset this week was the Broncos beating the Bills, and it was a bad matchup for the Bills. But Buffalo and Josh Allen proved that to be incorrect, and they move on to the second round. We both picked Buffalo. We both won. So we can move on to the NFC, and it was really weird how the NFL did that this year. They had all the AFC games, so we knew the AFC schedule by 4 o'clock on Sunday. Not a single NFC game has started yet, but they started with the number 7 seed, the Green Bay Packers, at the number 2 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles. And in this matchup, there was a lot of Love Hurts songs being played in the background because we had Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts. But Philadelphia wins 22-10. Dallas Goedert had the play of the game. He was not going to be stopped from scoring a touchdown. He was throwing defenders off of him. It was Marshawn Lynch-like run to the end zone. A little bit slower and obviously a little bit less of a running back there, but that was the play that kind of sealed the game. But both Barkley and Jacobs do have solid days on the ground, which do really good things for the running back position going forward. It proves that it is still an important position and we can pay the right running backs. But in the end, the Packers were dropping like flies, unable to stay healthy when it counted most. And I know you saw this, A.J. Brown reading a book on the sideline. It felt like Philly was a little bit disengaged in this matchup, and I hope that they're more engaged for their second round matchup. But what did you make of this game, Alex?
For me, it looked like Green Bay just wasn't ready to compete in the playoffs at all. And Philadelphia was also struggling on offense anyway, as well. So both looked like their defenses came to play and their offenses really didn't. So I would be concerned about both these teams moving forward. Maybe Love plays better when he's healthier next year. Maybe Jalen Hurts needs a new offensive coordinator or new head coach to go back to his magic. And we'll see if that happens. So if Kellen Moore gets a job somewhere else, maybe they'll bring in someone else. Or if Philadelphia loses, maybe they'll fire Sirianni and bring in a better head coach. I don't know. But
yeah, and what if Sirianni wins that battle and gets Jalen Hurts traded to, like, say, a team like the Indianapolis Colts where he repairs with the Shane Steichen?
then the Colts are going to have a good year. Because
Exactly. So
yeah.
there's a lot of things that could happen, but there is a history of a battle between Hurts and Sirianni. So we'll see who ultimately wins that battle. I don't think they both can coexist forever. So that'll be interesting. I think the Packers were really banged up down the stretch. I think they had lost a couple of receivers. They had lost a bunch of defenders. Their offensive line was in shambles by the end of the Philly game. So I think once they get a little bit healthier, also this is year 2 for the majority of the wide receivers on that team. So I think they'll only grow and take a step forward next year. And you have to remember Jordan Love was hurt was it the first game in Brazil?
He only
Yeah,
had
go ahead.
one year in the league before that, and people were already saying he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I'm like, he had a good season, but he was like a fourth year starter basically, because first 3 years of his career he was on the bench, and that was his fourth year in the league, and he was basically a rookie that year, and people were already saying he's great. 1 year success is not great. Like same reason that you point out with coordinators, I point out with a lot of quarterbacks, and I need to see more from him. Yes, he was hurt, but supposedly he had 4 number 1 wide receivers, and that offense
Do
looked
you
pretty
believe that
miserable.
though?
No, obviously not. Obviously not.
He
You
still
have
went
to.
25-11 for touchdown to interceptions, and he didn't play in all the games because of his knees. I don't think he had a bad year.
I don't think he had a good year. I wouldn't call him a great quarterback yet. Like you need to see another good year from him. I don't see it yet with him, and I really don't buy into Josh Jacobs at all, but they did lean heavily on him because they had a hard time with the passing offense, with anyone staying healthy on the passing offense. So receivers
1,300
and
yards
quarterback.
rushing and 15 touchdowns.
Yeah, they leaned heavy on him. I don't think he was that efficient as a runner. Honestly, he just sledgehammers.
4.4 yards per carry. That's pretty efficient.
Okay, Jeff. Whatever you say. He'll keep that up forever and ever. Next year he'll have 2,400 yards rushing on the ground. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. But you were saying that he would be better, or Aaron Jones would be better than him, and that was false this year. The
I
Packers did
didn't.
right off of moving off of Jones.
I don't know. I think Aaron Jones was okay. He just had nagging injuries this year, which I guess is that's been his MO for a while. He has nagging injuries.
I only crack up because there's no possible way that you could be wrong. There's always a reason why you're wrong. Never just I was wrong on this player. I've never heard that from you, so we'll get there someday though. I promise.
I say I'm wrong on players all the time. I literally just said I was wrong about Lassiter and Stingley for the Texans because I liked Sauce Gardner over Stingley that year, and Sauce Gardner had the success earlier. And I liked other defensive backs over Lassiter, but now Lassiter has proven probably the steal of the draft. So I'm wrong about players all the time.
Absolutely.
I,
But once you
I,
form an
well,
opinion on a
well,
certain player, it
I
sticks.
thought Aaron Jones was going to stay healthy and break his mold of being hurt every year, and nope, he's hurt every year, so I'm wrong that he could stay healthy at all. I was also wrong. I didn't realize that Green Bay's offensive line was better than I thought because going into the draft, I thought they had some holes at the offensive line. They've proven to be a pretty solid unit this year.
You've just proven every reason why you can't say Josh Jacobs had a good year. Their line was better than I thought. Jones was everything but Josh Jacobs had a better year than I thought he ever could have had.
Well, the best year he's ever had was that 1,600-yard
I
season
know.
with the Raiders.
No. And but also, like, I'm the person that admits when I'm wrong. I did a 180 on Nico Collins, and I had him in the top 15 of receivers last year, or going into this year. So after saying that he was trash, so I do 180s once I get new information.
We'll see. We'll see on Josh Jacobs.
I did see this year. This year doesn't
I
count.
I don't think he's that good of a player. I think he had great success this year. He performed better than I thought. I was wrong about the output of his season. I
Yeah.
don't think he can do it 2 years in a row.
We'll see. I think a lot of it's up here though. And not in reality. But yeah,
I
we'll
think
see
even
year 2
I
here.
think even Packers fans don't believe that he actually put up the stats that he put up.
But he did.
You have a buddy with the same name as you that doesn't like Josh Jacobs at all, and he's a huge Packers fan.
We'll see. We'll see in 2025, which I'm really excited about. I'll give you a little spoiler here, but Josh Jacobs will be in my top 10 of running backs going into 2025. for fantasy football rankings. And I don't understand how anyone could have him outside of the top 10 going into 2025, especially after what he can do with the Packers. They spent money on him. They used him. That's what you like to see out of free agency. The same thing happened with Saquon Barkley, and that paid off in spades for them as well. He had one of his best years, if not his best year as well. Who will probably be my number one back going into 2025. I haven't done running backs just yet.
We'll probably have to put Saquon number one.
Yeah, and I have him there right now. I'll fully cop to it, and preview of my number two back will make you very happy. Is Jahmyr Gibbs.
I'm surprised you don't have Jonathan Taylor as your number two.
No, I mean, he finished RB on the year. Why would I have him my number two?
Because they're likely not going to have Richardson as a starting quarterback. So you should look at games when Flacco's starting, and see how effective Jonathan Taylor is and exploit that over a season. I'm sure he'd end up running back two, stats-wise.
Yeah, and then I got your buddy Bijan number three going into next year. Your buddy Bijan. So the young guys are finally coming up, and I think that the running back is back, because I think the top 10 running backs next year are going to be all legit starting running backs.
Where do you have 32-year-old Derrick Henry?
He right now would probably slot into my fourth.
32-year-old Derrick Henry at number 4. That doesn't sound good.
I mean, the season starts less than 8 months from now. So if he's gonna jump off a bridge in 8 months from now, which I'm not gonna bet on, then age ain't nothing but a number. He's proven it. 1,900 yards. Even if he does 85% of that, he's still a top 4, top 8 back, I believe, in the
If he does 50% of that.
Do you think he's going to drop down to 50% of that with the Ravens?
At some point, age comes for us all, even athletes.
Father time, yep.
And the age cliff for running backs is 9. And he's already 2 years past that. So it's coming for him at some point, and it'll hit hard when it does.
So the fact that he had a career year, not his best year, but a career year, at age 31, I know conditions were perfect, but there has been other running backs there where the conditions have been the same and they haven't been able to put up the same numbers. I think the fact that he did 1,900 yards at age 31 lines him up for a first ballot Hall of Famer already. Like, there's no doubt about it in my brain now.
Does Adrian Peterson have a Hall of Fame jacket?
Not yet. I don't think he's qualified just yet, because he kept coming out and playing a couple of years.
If it's between Adrian Peterson and Derrick Henry, who are you giving it to?
Peterson, because I think Peterson was more transcendent. But Peterson last played in 2021, and I think you got to be 5 years out of the league before you qualify for the jacket. So he's 1 year away.
Yeah.
But they both have 2,000-yard rushing seasons. But Derrick Henry's second best year, which was this year, is better than any other Adrian Peterson second best year. So I think it's a conversation now.
I think Adrian Peterson, talent-wise, is probably the best running back talent-wise that's ever come out.
Yeah, and I think he had better receiving ability too.
Yeah, rushing. No, Adrian Peterson had terrible receiving ability.
Better than Henry, though.
I don't know. Henry might actually have him beat there. That's the biggest weakness to Adrian Peterson's game was his lack of receiving ability. It was awful.
So Adrian Peterson, according to Pro Football Reference, is ranked 8th all-time on the Hall of Fame meter. The average Hall of Fame running back is 106.95, and he's 125.67, which makes me believe that Adrian Peterson is a no-brainer Hall of Famer. Frank Gore falls just under that average, so we'll see if he actually gets in or not.
Where do they have Derrick Henry right now?
He's a lot lower right now. I wonder why. He's like right above Larry Zonka, who's a Hall of Famer, but below like Sproles and Sean Alexander and Tiki Barber and Priest Holmes.
Is below Sproles? That's insulting.
I don't know if they've factored this year in yet.
Okay.
So his Hall of Fame meter is only 52. I was reading Larry Zonka, sorry. It's 54.37.
What?
Yep.
I think they just don't view Derrick Henry as the same kind of talent as other running backs.
It's weird because he's won a ton of awards. He's been an all-pro multiple years. He had to have won an Offensive Player of the Year award. Yeah, it looks like he won it in 2020. He's finished 9th in the MVP, which is hard for running backs to even be mentioned in the MVP conversation anymore unless you have a 2,000-yard rushing season. Like Barkley had that, and he's not even in the conversation for MVP this year. So I don't think anyone will vote for Barkley unless you're a Giants homer.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
So I know we just went down a whole tunnel here of Josh Jacobs. I think Barkley will be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done as well. But we both picked the Eagles. We both won. But the next matchup was the closest matchup of the week, and it was the number 6 Washington Commanders at the number 3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Commanders do pull it out with a last-second doink, which I think there was a couple of those this weekend, and they win 23-20. And Baker Mayfield was good in this game, but the turnover at the end is what sealed the game for the Commanders. And Alex, would you believe that this is the only higher seed losing this weekend? So all the other higher seeds won this weekend, except for this.
So that means they probably won't change the playoff seeding rules like they're considering in college. So we'll keep the division winners as the higher seeds. And I think that this was also like on paper, like the Texans and Chargers, it was closer teams in talent. And throughout the game, they certainly seemed like it because it was neck and neck the entire game between Washington and Tampa Bay. But we both picked Tampa Bay. They lost to the Washington Commanders with a rookie quarterback. It's kind of confusing to me because both teams have roughly the same colors. So I'm like, which one's Tampa? Which which one's Washington? I thought that both played mostly kind of well. I think that Todd Bowles with the Buccaneers had some bad game management and bad challenge and go for it decisions. I think they should consider replacing him instead of losing Liam Cohen. Probably not an easy decision for them. But the Commanders are the best team on challenges and on fourth down decision making in the league, which is insane to think about. So I think the Commanders have a real chance to actually be perennially good now, especially if their quarterback doesn't get obliterated by big hits that he's managed to avoid the same kind of hits he took in college in the pros so far.
Absolutely. I had said on social media that I believe that the Buccaneers would have been a real Super Bowl contender this year if they had Chris Godwin. The guy was on an absurd pace before he went out. So there was that. Also, I've thought internally, obviously that's how you think, that Chris Godwin is a really good fit with Terry McLaurin in Washington. And I know that'll be a big sticking point for 2025 for the Commanders, is getting a second weapon and more weapons for Jaden Daniels, who has proven in year one that he is at the very least a NFL starting quarterback and potentially a budding star quarterback in the league as well.
Right. What else we got here?
Matchup left. We got one matchup left, and it's the number 5 Vikings, and this was a Monday night game at the number 4 Los Angeles Rams, but it wasn't at Los Angeles. It was moved to Arizona due to the wildfires, and we send out our thoughts and with the community of Los Angeles and California during this time. But this is where the Rams kind of rose to the occasion during adversity, and Stafford carried the Rams to a not particularly close win in a 27-9 victory. I don't really have many notes from this game because none of the stars really performed well outside of Stafford. Obviously, they didn't have to use Nakua and Kupp in the second half. But yeah, my only question for the Vikings out of this is where do they go with Darnold in this situation? He's an unrestricted free agent that carried them to set 14 wins and I think 40 some touchdowns this year. I'd have to go look that up. But Yeah, I think they're going to have a really interesting offseason if they give the keys of the car to a rookie, JJ McCarthy. And what if he doesn't live up to what Sam Darnold didn't live here or did this year? So there's that. And then there's the other thought that they let this coaching staff and GM draft a quarterback in the first round, and now it's time to coach up that prospect. So there's multiple thoughts here. It was 35 touchdowns. So, but that's no joke. I think that was top 5 in the league this year. So, Alex, what do you have to say about this matchup and Sam Darnold's future?
Well, I think the Lions provided the keys to shutting down Darnold by blitzing heavy. No one, for some reason, tried that the entire season until the Lions did it. The Rams were able to pull it off because they have two of the best defensive rookies this year, and Jared Verse and Fisk as well. And they really look like they haven't regressed at all with Aaron Donald leaving and retiring this past off season. So they blitz heavy. They also have a very reliable quarterback in Matthew Stafford, who also is an edge there. I thought this game was relatively close early on, and then they basically just shut down the Vikings offense entirely. I'm still disappointed with the Rams not getting Cooper Kupp involved more than just one catch. It seems like it's Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams almost exclusively. Then they throw it to their backup tight end well before they throw it to Cooper Kupp, which kind of seems disrespectful to me. And I don't know why they're not utilizing him more. But for me, I don't think that the Vikings can repeat the success. So even if they keep Darnold, I don't think that they can get to 14 wins again. And they are losing a good amount of their starters this offseason. They're set to be free agents. And despite that, they won't have that much cap space, especially if they pay Darnold $40 to $50 million per year. So it's a real decision for them. Do they let Darnold walk? Do they tag him and trade him? Do they tag him and keep him a year? Do they extend him? What do we do with Darnold? I don't know what their ultimate decision is going to be. They might be okay bringing him back for another season, or they might be best suited to roll with JJ, who's on a controlled rookie contract. They can sign Daniel Jones to a 1-year deal similar to what they already just did with Darnold as a insurance and a backup, and they can get compensation picks when Darnold signs with someone else. So
Yeah,
that might be the play.
I think the thing that's not thought about there is, does Daniel Jones want to sign with the Vikings where they are turning the keys over to JJ McCarthy, or does he go to a team like Indianapolis that he could take the job from Anthony Richardson, or does he go to the Raiders who don't have a great starting quarterback option right now? So he's an unrestricted free agent. They're not going to tag Daniel Jones. So he's free to go wherever he thinks that is best for his career.
I think it's important to note that he cleared waivers when he was released from the Giants, and he chose to go to the Vikings over the Indianapolis Colts. So I think that he is likely the succession plan if the Vikings let Darnold walk. So it makes sense to me. There's every bit as much a chance for him to beat out JJ as Richardson. And I think that the Vikings have more on
That's fair.
offense to benefit him than the Colts do. And I like what the Colts have. It's just the Vikings have even better.
Yeah, I think the only unknown out there is if Ben Johnson goes to the Raiders and calls up Daniel Jones and says, "Hey, I want you to come to the Raiders to compete for the starting job here." Like, that's very enticing as well with a good offensive coordinator.
Or they
And
could go
Brock
Darnold.
Bowers. They could. They could. I wouldn't recommend that for Darnold because they don't really have the pieces just yet. And I think that would destroy his career and confidence. You know where I think Darnold should go. And you hate it. And I think he should go to San Francisco. And I think they should tell Brock Purdy to go pound sand. But I'm not sure that will happen. But
Yeah, I'm not going to spend this episode arguing with you for an hour of Brock Purdy over Sam Darnold. I think it's a disgusting conversation to begin with because both of them have limits to their upside. But short
yeah,
story, I think Purdy is better than Darnold, and you think Darnold's better than Purdy. That's a debate people can have. Maybe one day we'll dedicate an actual full episode just to that conversation, Jeff. But this episode
absolutely. We got a whole
started to get
off
a little
season.
lengthy. Yeah, this episode is getting a little lengthy in its own right. But we can talk. We can talk more about
We
teams options and stuff this off
yeah,
season.
we came in fiery today. So
So
Hey,
Jeff and I
we
had
were
a
even more fiery before the episode started, so
we were fiery a couple days ago when we were actually texting about it. Jeff,
yep.
though, he's got his texting from his keyboard, so he's like shooting 17 messages by the time I send one back. It's so crazy.
It's
But
life with ADHD. Like you get another comment and another comment that comes to the brain. You're like, this is great, this is great, this is great. Keep sending.
Jeff will be like, he's so quick. He'll be like, "Yeah, you got nothing to say about that, do you? Do you? Do you?" I'm like, "I haven't even read your messages yet. What are you talking about?"
I'll always finish every single text thread with, if you don't reply to this in 15 seconds, I'm right. I'm going to do that from now on.
It's like I'm not that quick of a reader, and I haven't even opened my phone yet. But I'm sorry, I got all those messages.
Wait, do you have a flip
Whatever.
phone?
No, I have a touchscreen, but
Open my phone.
I know. Yeah, well, yeah. Click the button to make the lights come on. There you go.
The lights are on, but nobody's home. All right. We got the divisional round, which this should get you really excited because the very first matchup is your Houston Texans at the number 1 seed, Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs will be going in, not playing since Christmas with their starters. So that is 6 days in December plus another 18 days in January. So that's 24-day layoff for the Kansas City Chiefs. 4:30 p.m. game. Alex, break down the matchup and who you taking?
All right, so we have the Houston Texans who got the upset over a lower seeded team from Wild Card Week against the number 1 team in the AFC. Kansas City struggled this entire season. They have, like you pointed out, they have 2 whole weeks off for the starters. Texans are starting to heat up a little bit. I don't know if it's enough for this matchup, but for most NFL fans out there, it's a benefit because either you have a team that's never won a Super Bowl advance to the next week, or you have a team that's in contention to get a three-peat, which I don't think has ever happened in the NFL, so it would be the first time ever. So either way, you get a first out of this matchup going forward. I think this is probably like a 51%, 49% situation. I'd lean the Chiefs because it's really hard to go against Mahomes. I don't know if the Texans have enough to get past the Chiefs. I do think it has a chance to be pretty close in a very, very cold matchup that's luckily in the afternoon and not at night. So I lean Chiefs this one. I'll be very happy if the Texans beat them, though.
Absolutely. I'm going to go the Chiefs in this matchup. They did play roughly a month ago, December 21st. So 4 days before that Christmas Chiefs layoff. And the Chiefs won 27-19. So it was at Kansas City, so the same conditions will apply. I think the same time will apply, same day of the week will apply. So if the Texans can figure out how to get 8 additional points, this is a game. So that's really what it comes down to. And if Kansas City comes out a little rusty and only scores 17 points in this game or 20 points in this game, then it's a much closer game. There's a lot of variables, and 24-day layoff really has me on edge for the Chiefs, but give me the Chiefs in this matchup.
There's a good chance that they didn't even game plan for the Texans until after the Texans got the win because they didn't expect them to make it that far. So,
Exactly. But they are just game planned from less than a month ago,
yeah.
so at least there's something to recall.
It feels like a different Texans team than a month ago too, especially their defense able to harass people. Assuming refs actually call holding, I think that this could be a closer game than people think.
Yeah, and I wonder if the Chiefs relied too much on what the Texans were before they kind of snapped out of it. But you have to remember, the Texans really went downhill even further after the Tank Dell injury, because I really think that affected CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
And I think he's over it now. That one bobbled snap last week that kind of snapped CJ Stroud out of his funk. I hope he can continue it this week, and we'll see very early on. But he's going to have to contend with like Chris Jones and Spagnola's defense. So we'll see. But I think that the Houston Texans could give the Chiefs offense some fits. So we'll see if that's the case. It's going to be a much lower scoring game than people think too. So we will see. All right. So we can move on to the second game, which is Saturday night, 8 p.m. The Washington Commanders, the 6th seed, the lowest remaining seed in the playoffs, at the number 1 Detroit Lions. And Alex, I think this game here is going to be much closer than people think it's going to be. I think Jaden Daniels has the ability to keep games close. He also has the ability to have games come down to the fourth quarter. I don't know if you've noticed that a lot this season, but a lot of his games have come down to the fourth quarter. And I think that he does not have enough firepower to win this matchup, but I do think he has enough firepower to keep it close. And I expect them to lose by roughly a field goal, but they did not play in the regular season. And if Detroit gets by the Commanders here, they will likely play Jalen Hurts in the NFC Championship game, and they will likely play either Mahomes, Lamar, or Allen in the Super Bowl. So this is like a little bit of practice against those rushing quarterbacks. So this is going to sharpen them up for those games, in my opinion, as well. So because they can't replicate this in practice, there's no way possible to replicate a Jaden Daniels in practice, so they don't even try. But this could sharpen them for future games, and they get David Montgomery back. What's your thoughts on this?
So I kind of agree with you that this is kind of, for me, it's like a test run for potentially facing Lamar or Allen more so than Mahomes.
You have
But
Hurts the round after this, potentially.
but we also could have Stafford, which they're very familiar with. So I think that for this matchup, I definitely think that the Detroit Lions should win this. They could disappoint, and that would lead to some interesting questions if they did. But I'm going Detroit. I think the Commanders have already surprised enough. I think this is as far as they get, and I think that they regroup and build on their year one success in the offseason.
Absolutely, but I think this run by the Commanders will make them very attractive for free agents. I think the new ownership makes them very attractive for free agents, so they are in a good spot going forward, even if they don't win this game. All right, the other NFC matchup will be Sunday at 3 p.m., and it's the number 4 Los Angeles Rams at the number 2 Philadelphia Eagles. And I hope the Eagles are a little more engaged in this matchup because I believe that the Rams can put up more than 10 points that the Packers did against the Eagles. And this could be a potentially much higher scoring game. The Rams have been displaced for well over a week now, so them traveling will feel like maybe even a getaway from everything that's going on right now. So it'll be more of a relief than a hindrance. But ultimately, I think the Rams defense is too young. I think that the offensive talent advantage still belongs to the Eagles. So as long as they can stay engaged in this matchup and not read books on the sideline, I will go the Philadelphia Eagles in this matchup.
I like both defenses. It's going to be very interesting. I'm going to go for the Los Angeles Chargers. Sorry, Rams. Same colors as the Chargers. I'm going to go for the Los Angeles Rams. I want to see Goff beat Stafford in the playoffs to advance to the Super Bowl. I think that'd be kind of cool. So that's what I want. I think both teams are pretty comparable right now. I think Sirianni is not as good as McVay as a coach, and I think that's the major difference.
You are 100% correct there. What you aren't correct on is the Stafford Goff thing. I would love to see Stafford whoop on Goff.
You're an anti-Goff, anti-Purdy kind of person.
No, I mean, I really like what Goff has done the last 2 to 3 years because I think he's really resurrected his career. I also believe McVay made the right decision moving off Goff and moving to Stafford because that did result in a Super Bowl victory. So I think it worked out for both sides, even though it took Goff a little bit longer to get there. But Stafford, one of the best playoff quarterbacks of all time. So took him a while to get there, but once he got there, he was pretty fire. So I hope you're right, but I'm hedging my bets on this one. because the Eagles aren't really a likable team right now, like other than Barkley. Barkley's very likable, but does anyone like AJ Brown right now? Does anyone like Sirianni right now? Just a lot less likable of a team, I think.
Yeah.
But Alex, they saved the best for last this week, and I'm sure they did this on purpose. 6:30 p.m. on Sunday evening, so you could keep the little ones up, and we plan on keeping the little one up for this one. It's the number 3 Baltimore Ravens at the number 2 Buffalo Bills. Alex, who are you taking in this matchup?
Leaving it for me,
I did
man.
NFC, you do AFC, sir.
I would love for Buffalo to win this game. I would absolutely love it if they won. However, I think that Baltimore's rushing ability is just a little bit edges out the Bills. I think Baltimore's defense is a little bit better. I think I'm gonna go with Baltimore in this one. I don't love it, but I know you're probably gonna go Buffalo, so we have to get another difference in here somehow.
Yeah, I am going to go Buffalo in this matchup. It's really hard to beat a team a second time, especially a really great team in a season. And arguably, this is Josh Allen's most complete team around him. I think James Cook really has come on. I think what they did to Denver last week, who has been a consistently good defense all year, which the Ravens were not, I think that shows that they could pick apart even good defenses. So I'm not really worried about the defensive part of this. Defenses may not even matter in this matchup because I just feel like there's going to be so much focus on the quarterbacks, and the quarterbacks are going to feel that pressure. It's basically Lamar versus Allen out there. Will there be any turnovers? Could be the biggest question of this, because Allen and Lamar really haven't turned the ball over a lot this entire season. So that'll be an interesting caveat to look at. I don't think Henry fumbles often. I don't think James Cook fumbles often. So I think this game is going to be about protecting the football, and it's going to be cold too. So it's going to be a cold one. I think it's going to feel like it's in the 20s or the teens over around these parts on Sunday.
Both of them
Bless
have
everyone that's going to the game.
They both have outdoor stadiums. They're both used to playing in the cold. I don't think there's going to really be that much of an advantage there. So it's going to be a close
ever
game.
get used to playing in the teens? That's a good question.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good. Hopefully, it's a good game either way, and hopefully, we're happy with the victor either way because we want the best competition. We want the best team to win, and these are very evenly matched squads. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and if you follow the path, I believe Joe Flacco and was it Trent Dilfer won the Super Bowl with the Ravens in their 28th year, and Lamar just happens to be 28. So if you want to follow history seems to be on Baltimore's side here.
Yep, but what I'm getting out of this is whoever makes it, the Texans are going to kill, right?
You know, if the Texans win and the Bills win, I am going to have a big decision the following weekend if I buy tickets to go see the Bills and the Texans in the AFC Championship game.
I mean, that would be kind of cool.
I'm 45 minutes away, so the time to get there is not the big deal. It's just, if we're talking $1,000 a ticket, then I'm probably out. So
What week is the Super Bowl?
it is the 9th.
The 9th.
Kind of early this year, but that's okay.
Okay, I think that is it. So you have Buffalo, I have Baltimore, you have Philly, I have Los Angeles. We both have Detroit, we both have Kansas City. So we're both favoring the one seeds, and then we differ on the other ones.
Sounds like a divisional round preview.
Okay, well, that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for downloading or listening to this episode, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
You can find us on all podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy and with our handle N2E Fantasy on all social media platforms. Please join our community and give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Hi, everybody.